Hey everyone, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com, and today we're looking at the NZXT N7 Z490 motherboard. This is going to be an interesting one. Let's do this. Do you sometimes feel like there's not enough RGB in your life? Yay! Or are you one of those people who's actually starting to get a bit of a tan off of your system? Yay! Well, no matter what the situation, you're in luck. Thanks to Team Group. With Team Group's gaming extreme ARGB DDR4 memory, you can choose how much lighting you have in your life. A sleek mirrored design that really stands out, or fully lit for the people that just can't get enough. High speeds of up to 4000 MHz, these memory modules really do have it all. A premium set of memory without the premium cost. Check out the link in the description to find out more. So as I mentioned, today we're going to be looking at the N7 Z490 motherboard, which looks, well, pretty identical to the N7 Z390 motherboard, which looked pretty identical to the N7 Z370 motherboard. So yeah, this is kind of where things went wrong for NZXT in the past. So the idea has always been there. The problem has been with NZXT and their range of motherboards, the execution's generally been pretty poor. As we all kind of know, it is common knowledge that they tend to use ECS to make the motherboard. So they go to them and say, here's the design, we want it to look like this, we want it to have these features, do what you gotta do. Well, in all honesty, ECS aren't exactly the greatest motherboard manufacturer out on the market. Just look at sort of market share between ASUS, MSI, ASRock, Gigabyte. ECS are kind of down the low end of the scale. So this time they've decided to change it up just a little bit. They've actually gone with ASRock, which kind of tells us that potentially the quality is going to be better, the features and the performance should be there, and even just, and I say this with such a smile on my face, the BIOS is going to be so much better. Anyone who's ever used one of the N7 boards in the past, whether it be Z370 or Z390, yeah, you'll kind of know the struggles that I'm talking about. So the other really big kind of problem with the NZXT range of motherboards, especially with the Z370 when that launched, was the price. It was just too damn expensive. We're talking $350 if I remember rightly. That's just crazy money. So you're all going to be pleased to know that this is actually launching at £220 in the UK and $229.99 US in America. Ha! That's a good price. I mean, to put it into some kind of perspective, that basically competes on a price point level with the Z490A from ASUS. It also competes with the Pro Carbon from MSI and many other boards from Gigabyte with their Elite AC and even ASRock with their Velocita Phantom Gaming motherboard. So it seems like it's actually going to be at a level that is really going to compete for what the average consumer actually wants to go out and buy. The one thing that I actually would love to see from NZXT is them trying to compete on the AMD level. It always seems to have been an Intel thing. Maybe that's coming in the future, who knows. So let's talk about the design. Well, it looks pretty identical to the previous generation. It keeps the ATX form factor, which we all know and love, and keeps that wonderful unique armor shielding. It also has a built-in I/O shield, which I honestly believe every single motherboard in this day and age should have. Whether it be cheap or whether it be expensive, it should have that feature. Again, like the previous generation boards, it comes in black or white, and I kind of wish that more brands went with the white motherboard look. I think it looks really, really nice. One maybe little feature that I would have liked to have seen, but this is personal preference, is the PCB to be white as well. I mean, when did motherboard manufacturers stop doing this, and why? So unlike previous generation motherboards from NZXT where the armor was actually clipped on and you literally pulled it off to pop it off, this is actually screwed down. So if you want to take it off, you have to turn the motherboard over and unscrew it. Now, as with previous generation as well, they have put a big focus on the layout of the connectors and the ports. So they've tried to keep everything either at the top or the bottom of the board, which definitely helps with cable management. Sadly, after speaking to NZXT, they have said that there's no extra colors available. So you may remember, again, on previous generations, they had the ability to change the bit around the CPU socket to purple. I believe they had blue as well. Sadly, at the moment, that's not a big focus for them. So let's talk about the nitty gritty. Well, it comes with a 12-phase VRM, so technically it has 8 phases for the vCore, 2 for the iGPU, and 1 phase each for the system agent and the I/O. Now the 8+2 phases for the vCore and VCC GT, or iGPU, are rated at 50 amps each, which is plenty of power even when overclocking. In terms of the power delivery, it does have an 8-pin and a 4-pin connector, which is a nice little bump up from the previous generation, but is pretty much on par with other Z490 motherboards out there on the market. This is especially needed when you're using a chip like the 125 watt Monster 10900K, which is exactly what we tested with, so stay tuned for them benchmarks. Any eagle-eyed viewers out there will notice around the CPU socket that we do have Nichicon 12K black capacitors. This is definitely a firm favourite from ASRock, so that kind of further instills in our mind that this potentially could actually be a very, very good motherboard. So as I mentioned, in the past you could actually put on different colours around the CPU socket, and looking at it a little bit closely, you can actually see why that's not really going to be possible. This is technically stuck on and is actually one big heatsink unit, as opposed to in the past when it was just kind of a cover that went over it. Maybe there's a reason that NZXT have gone down this route. Maybe it helps with VRM cooling, which they weren't exactly the greatest at on previous gens. So what about storage? Well, there's 4 SATA ports and there's 2 M.2s. I mean, it's enough, I guess, at a board around this price point. The only sad thing is, and we did confirm this with NZXT, well, the M.2 ports are only PCIe Gen 3. So even when Rocket Lake hits the market, well, you're not going to have the functionality for PCI Express Gen 4 on this board. USB-wise, there's headers for 3 USB 2.0s, giving us 6 in total, 1 USB 3.2 Gen 1 header, which supports up to 2 ports, and there's also a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port. Now, in terms of style choices with the USB 3.2, they've actually gone parallel with the board, which I think cleans things up quite nicely. I do wish that they did that with a 24 pin though. It just kind of seems a little bit, I don't know, pointless doing it there, but not there. In terms of the lighting, you'll be pleased to know there's actually no RGB on the board whatsoever, which I really like the fact that they've gone with that choice. I mean, why put this wonderful looking armor on there and then just ruin it with RGB lighting? You know, if you want to add RGB, then do it in the rest of your case. It doesn't need to be on the motherboard. So good job there. If you do want extra RGB though, you will be pleased to know that there are 2 NZXT RGB connectors at the top for connecting Hue-based devices. There's an addressable header at the bottom, and just next to it is a 4-pin standard RGB header. So for our expansion slots, you'll find there are 2 PCI Express X16 slots. One of them actually operates at X4 speeds, and then there's 3 X1 slots. They've actually decided to ditch the PCI Express X4 in favour of an extra PCI Express X1. You will be pleased to know as well that it does have crossfire functionality, but does anyone actually use dual GPUs anymore? In terms of other connectivity on the board, you do have 7 fan connectors. You have a CPU and an AIO pump and 2 system fans at the top, as well as 3 more system fan connectors at the bottom of the board. The only other standout features are a power and reset button at the bottom of the board, post LEDs, though I would have personally preferred a debug LED. I just think it's easier and cleaner to read. A clear CMOS, which is kind of like a solder point as opposed to pins like we'd normally see. And with all the main connectors at the top of the bottom, as I mentioned, cable management should be easy as hell. As I also mentioned, because this board is now made by ASRock as opposed to ECS, the BIOS is just so much better. It's easy to navigate through, although there's a couple of sections which I would have rather seen together. So CPU frequency and then voltage, having them in 2 separate areas, when you're overclocking, it just gets a little bit mundane. And of course, if you don't want to do anything through the BIOS, you have full control over the RGB lighting, as well as all the fan curves and things like that through NZXT Cam. I know a lot of people don't like installing software, but trust me, Cam has actually got a lot better over the years. So let's flip the board around and take a look at the I/O. I've got to admit, I'm a little bit disappointed here. It seems like maybe NZXT decided to go for lots of internal USB headers, and they kind of forgot about what was actually meant to go on the rear I/O. Especially at this price point, there are boards out there with just a little bit more connectivity options. With that in mind though, it does still have a USB 3.2 Gen 2 port, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 ports, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, and 2 USB 2.0 ports. So I guess maybe I'm being a little bit critical of the USB ports, but I have a lot of USB devices. I guess where I do a little bit of streaming and things like that, I do pretty much populate all of my USB ports. On top of that, we also have 2.5G Ethernet, AX200 Wi-Fi 6, 5.1 channel audio jacks with an optical SP diff, and a clear CMOS button. And for anyone who cares, it has Bluetooth 5.1. Does anyone actually use Bluetooth 5.1? So with all of the features out the way, all of the design out the way, well, it all comes down to the performance, right? So let's run them glorious benchmarks. So as you can see from the charts, it actually performed, well, frankly great. But there is a little bit of a caveat here. Obviously the boards that we compared it to, a lot of them we did at launch. And since then there has been BIOS updates. So I want to sort of, I don't know, maybe explain that the NZXT has a better BIOS. If we were to go back and test the other ones, we'd actually expect the score to increase a little bit. But even then, the scores that we got from the NZXT board were actually very, very good. They were kind of on the higher end of the scale in comparison, but I'm really pleased with it. I mean, it's not terrible. That's kind of what I was expecting. Even with the latest BIOS and everything like that, I was expecting maybe it to be terrible, but that's just based off kind of past experience. Now that they've moved over to ASRock from ECS, seems like they've listened to the community. They've fixed the problems. They've just refined things just a little bit. So I guess the other area of it is how far will it overclock? Let's take a look. So with the overclocking, again, I was pleasantly surprised. It seems that the power outfit that they've actually got on this board really does seem to work. And we were able to get 5.2 gigahertz at 1.375 volts. We were actually able to boot at 5.3, open up some applications. It was kind of semi-stable, but even at 1.4 volts, it just completely fell over. So we went back to the drawing board, clocked it back down to 5.2, and just tried to bring that voltage down a little bit. Sadly, that didn't happen either, so we were stuck on 1.375 volts, which under our Noctua D15S, well, temperatures were actually pretty reasonable, at about 84, 85 degrees max at load. Obviously, if you're going for this maybe as a 24/7 overclock, you might want to just come down a little bit, or in my professional opinion, because I'm professional, I would say that ideally you're going to be looking at just letting Intel Turbo Boost do its own thing and just boost when it needs to. So what do we think of the N7 Z490? Have NZXT done enough to kind of redeem the bad press that they've had in the past? In all honesty, I think they have. I actually really, really like this board. The design is great. I mean, I've never really been critical of that. I think the design has always been great, even from the original Z370. They just seem to have maybe fixed things a little bit, refined it, and just made it a little bit better. Let's just say it's matured into something that, I don't know, could actually be very competitive in the market. So it's going to be interesting to see what kind of, pickup this has in the retail world, and I don't know how good it actually looks in a system. In all honesty, I think this is going to look great inside any system. It looks clean, it has the performance, it has the features, and it's actually a pretty decent price. So there you go. Let me know in the comments section below what you guys actually think of this motherboard. In all honesty, I think NZXT are doing something really, really great here. And I honestly want to see them do something on the AMD platform, because if they can compete at this level, I don't know, maybe we've got someone new in the market who can actually shake things up a little bit. I'm really excited. I don't know about you guys. Other than that, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, you know exactly what to do, and I will see you in the next one. And also let me know what you think about this new kind of way that we're filming the videos, with lots of bokeh in the background and lots more B-roll. Be really excited to see what you guys think. Until next time, see you then. See you later. Bye-bye. How do I normally end a video?